For about the last week, I've had the opportunity to ride this 2018 KTM Duke 390. This bike has a little bit of windscreen on it and some crash bars, but other than that, it's basically stock. Got about 6,000 miles on it, so it's well broken in. I have been able to take this bike to work. I've been able to take it up through the twisties. It has absolutely blown away my expectations. With 44 horsepower, a 6-speed transmission, upside down forks, everything that you need to feel good and get good at riding a motorcycle is in this package.
All right, so I've been riding around on this Duke 390 for the last week, and I've been really enjoying it. So let me give you a few comments on the good news, the bad news. Bad news first. Bad news. What this bike is not. This bike is not an off-road bike. No surprise there. It's not what it's designed to do. That said, you can take any bike off-road if you're careful enough. There is, though, a limit on what you can do and how comfortable you will be. So, no surprise, not an off-road bike, but to say that you couldn't go down a gravel road or do a light trail work on this thing is just not true. I would not classify this bike as a tourer. The owner of this bike has ridden it for five hours at a time, no problems. That said, he's a lot younger than me, so his knees and his body can take a beating like that better than I can. But you know, the spring, the suspension, the rear shock, well, you can adjust preload on the rear suspension. I would not consider this a proper touring bike. For me, as 6 feet tall, the frame is just a little tight. My feet are tucked up under my knees, tighter than I'd like them to be. So to do this for long hours, you know, the seat's comfortable enough, but probably every hour and a half, I would want to take a good 20 minute break or so just to stretch the knees out and get a little more room to move around. The seat would probably be comfortable enough, but although I would recommend a little bit of padding if you're going for a long ride. You could put on a backpack, you could throw a duffel bag on the back. They make luggage for these things, so you could of course do it, but I don't think it's the ideal situation to try to tour on this motorcycle. And it's a naked bike, so you're going to get a lot of wind. I'm not necessarily calling that bad news, it's just the facts. The facts are that this bike does not have a lot of fairings, so you're going to get wet when it's raining. You're going to get a lot of wind on you on the highway. It's also not a big sport bike, right? Like, it's not 1,000 cc, it's not a 650, it's not a multi-cylinder. So the audio profile of this motorcycle is different, obviously, than something with 2 or 3 or 4 cylinders. I'm perfectly okay with the sound. In fact, I really enjoy the sound of this motorcycle, even with the stock exhaust, but it is a thumper. It rides like a thumper. The throttle response is good, but it's that of a thumper. So, you know, when I think about this motorcycle as, are you going to truly get all of the motorcycling experience that you would with a twin or something like that, or a 4-cylinder Screamer? No, you're not. That said, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what those bikes are. It also doesn't, you know, it's 44 horsepower. It's plenty, but it's not, I thought I lost my audio there. It's plenty, but it's not abundant, right? Like, you're not riding around with 100 horsepower on tap. You don't have the same low down grunt that you do with multi-cylinders. That said, there's plenty here. There's plenty here to keep you entertained. There's plenty here to take to the track, to dig into a corner, to really enjoy your ride, right? So I don't have any problems with this bike when it comes to power or when it comes to audio profile, but they're not larger. It's not a larger bike. So it's not roomy. You know, I do feel a little bit tight, but it's an upright naked bike. It's not a sport bike. So for me, that's a plus. I like naked bikes. I like the feeling of being able to You know, I don't have to be over the handlebars with weight on my wrists. And as I hit those bumps, it highlights a little bit about what the suspension is not. The suspension is not adjustable, but it is good suspension, right? And if I sprung this thing for my weight, it would probably be even a little tighter. But I have taken this thing through corners and through twisties, and it responds really, really well. I enjoy this motorcycle. And I'll pause just for a second and say, if this is your first video here, or maybe even more than a first video here, would love for you to subscribe and follow along. My goal here is to help people experience adventure, and that doesn't necessarily mean going out in the woods and camping. It could just mean going on a bike ride on the way to and from work. Let's talk about this Duke 390 a little bit more. What is this bike? It is a fantastic commuter. If you're buying this bike as transportation, you know, it gets, I think, around, based on my calculations so far, 55 miles per gallon. I am very curious what others have seen. So if you have different fuel economy metrics for this bike, please leave them in the comments. But 55 to 60 miles a gallon is pretty darn good, especially compared to my Sequoia, which gets 13 miles per gallon. So big improvement there, but that's a totally unfair comparison. This bike is fun. Plenty of throttle response to get me in trouble with. Hopefully that wasn't a double tap of the helmet, but it is it's plenty of fun. It's plenty rowdy enough. You could put a stunt cage on this thing. You can do wheelies on stoppies, and you know, you can have all kinds of entertaining time on this motorcycle. It is flickable, short wheelbase, very light. This thing I can throw in and out of turns and have a blast. It flows really well through the twisties, and the brakes are stoppy. So I have no problem bringing this bike to a halt. But to the point of this thing being flickable, you know, I can just move my hips around, and this thing knows where I want to go. It's reading my mind. It knows what I want to do just by the way I move my weight around. It's very responsive. Now, if you're looking for something that's a little more laid back and something that carries you without all of that, you know, you want something with a longer wheelbase, bigger front tire. Back to my off-road comments, this same engine and transmission package comes on the 390 Adventure. And that's a bike that I find very, very interesting. I think it could be a fantastic motorcycle for a lot of people. You know, the 390 package, even on the Husqvarna Svartpillen, you know, or Vitpillen 401, I would be very, very interested in owning a motorcycle like this, and I did not think I would be. So I'm very, very impressed with this motorcycle and the time I've gotten to ride it. I'm not a track day guy, so I'm not capable of commenting on exactly how perfect this would be for the track, but it kind of makes me want to have a track bike, if I'm being honest, right? Like 6 gears, 44 horsepower, and the power is available through most of the rev range. It'll lug out when you need it to. It'll get up in the 8,000 to 10,000 RPM, which is a ton of revs for a bike like this. It's high compression. You put, you know, high octane fuel in it. So I think this thing performs really, really well for just under $6,000, brand new. This is a very competitive motorcycle. You know, I was a Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 owner, and you know, that bike has 47 horsepower as a 650. It's a totally different riding experience. It's a totally different style, right? This is not a classically styled motorcycle. It's got a face kind of only a mother could love. I'm okay with that because I'm not looking at the front of the motorcycle when I'm riding it. But you know, the power to weight ratio is significant. It's a very light bike and a totally different ride than something like the Interceptor. It's enjoyable, it's fun. I would recommend anybody who wants good, solid transportation to pick up a 390. Anyone who wants flickable, twisty fun, this bike is perfect for that. You know, if you're looking at long distance touring, if you're looking to do significant off-roading, the 390 Adventure is probably a better motorcycle for that. But if you want to take some fun turns, I'm not having to lean that much. So good. So much fun. So much fun to be had on this motorcycle. A solid commuter, get you back to work. If you've got an hour plus commute every day, you know, maybe you think about it a little bit just because the knees are a little tight. But man, I truly enjoy this motorcycle. And I gotta tell you, this has been an eye-opening week for me when it comes to street bikes, because I'm more of an adventure bike rider. If you watch the channel at all, you know that. But I've had a great time riding this bike. And yeah, I kind of hate to give it back to Will. By the way, thanks Jake and Will for letting me borrow your motorcycle for a week. That is truly generous of you, and I appreciate it.
This bike brings so much joy at so many rev ranges. It's no surprise to me why it is so popular amongst beginners and advanced riders alike. In my opinion, one of the absolute best commuters and all-around motorcycles that you can start on and grow into, and even as an advanced rider have a ton of fun with, whether it be ripping through the twisties on the street, making it a track weapon, or again, just going back and forth to the office.